Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. And on the show today, all the way from Ontariffico, is Mark Graves. How are you doing today, Mark?
Doing good. Thanks, Dwayne, for having me.
Right on. We're happy
Tony,
to have
good to
you.
see you again. Great
Good to see you, Mark. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, and joining me as always is our trusty partner and technician and real the tech behind the show, Tony Tresselt. So, I think that we did talk about the question, so you've had a bit of chance to ponder it. But the question that we start every episode with, and that is, what is your first memory that you would be willing to share with us where you felt a connection to a tree or trees?
So it's kind of like I thought about it. It was kind of like a three-stage process. So where I really had that connection with trees, looking back on it now, is through the golf course aspect of it. The uh, the golf professionals at PGA, they hold a uh, four different major tournaments. Their big one is the Masters there down in Augusta, Georgia. And
Yeah.
for years, I was fascinated, not only with the golf itself, but I realize now more so the course being built out of a nursery. And they always talk about Magnolia Lane, and they're there in the spring when the magnolias are in bloom. So, part of leading me into this profession that I didn't know exist, known as arboriculture. I got into it through exploring golf course architecture as a profession.
Wow.
And as I was exploring that, all of these major tournaments I'm watching on TV in my teenage years are talking about these pivotal trees. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to be a good golf course architect, I guess it must be important, not knowing anything about that profession, to know how to preserve trees. So I better figure out how a tree grows and understand how to preserve it for when I'm designing courses in the future. And that's what led me, into this was, trying to explore golf course architecture and then meeting Ian Bruce down at Humber. So that would be my first real staying connection, I would say. But looking back on it, I remember two distinct trees growing up in my childhood years, and that was probably it was about a 30-foot willow tree, but it seemed enormous when I was in grade one at our public school.
Right.
And then my mom's side of the family owned a farm, so during my public school years, you get shipped off in the summer to the farm, and I remember the sugar maple line driveway, but the two maple trees up by the front entrance to the homestead, and the smell of the air in the morning, and there was just something about that area of the house. You open the door, 5:30 in the morning, the crispness of the summer smells that are in the air.
Yeah.
It's almost like, in a sense, the trees are whispering to you in part of that, early morning get up and go ritual, right?
Yeah.
So my uncle and my grandfather were both cabinet makers as well,
Okay.
growing up too. So you start to look back on it when you mentioned to me the question. I started looking back on my connections with trees. It's prevalent throughout my whole life, but I never really recognized it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, interesting. The and we know now that trees release, phenols, terpenes, gases basically that would I would think have scents associated with them that, all of us certainly know the smell of a forest. I'm sure, it's not just the earth and the compost that's taking place, but the living things that are emitting living living smells, right? It's like something that everyone can relate to, really.
Yeah, and they are fascinating organisms.
Yeah.
Like, I just once I got into this industry and started to look at them from that perspective, it's like, man, they really are fascinating, and we're just touching the tip of them right now in our understanding of them. I truly
Yeah,
believe that.
I agree. Yeah, it's they are, and and like you said, I think there is, it's like even calling this the Human Forestry Podcast. I You hear quite a number of people like they can't quite put into words or describe the feeling or the connection. It's often associated with a smell, but certainly a feeling, almost sentiism type of thing. Like with an animal, you can look in a dog's eyes and you can feel something. There's a connection, but yet somehow a lot of people find that somehow in trees or forests for sure, communities of trees. And I don't know if anyone can pinpoint exactly what that is. It's I guess spirituality comes to mind, but I don't know if could put your own take on that or what you think about that.
Oh, I think spirituality is a big component of it, right? I mean, we, what is the purpose of our existence? Like, what do we bring to this world? How do we interact with it? Um, trees are such foundational building blocks to our own survival,
Yeah,
right? If we didn't have trees, we wouldn't exist.
yeah,
Where if trees didn't have us, they would still be existing, right? So,
yeah,
um, does that mean that uh, trees? We talk about religion and how we all move towards various beliefs in that spiritual aspect of the all being, and you know is that all being really the trees um, that we're relating to,
yeah,
right? Is it possible that everything we build up, that feeling or aura we get, that there is, a being to follow, to believe in, is that
yeah,
aura precipitated to us by what trees give off?
yeah. I don't know, and I think it's definitely. I think a lot of people think about that, and I think one of the reasons, particularly when it comes to trees, is the long-lived nature of them. Anything that is older than us, you know, and that's obviously a moving target. The older you get, there's less people older than you eventually, right? But trees always are. They're always there. And then there's certain species of wildlife that are like that, like whales or tortoises, where we have this kind of reverence or awe and something that outlives us. And trees definitely represent that. Like, technically a grass does too, because but it's so recycled, or a fungus or an aspen grove. But you know, a tree, especially an old large tree, you can't help but have that sense of what is it seeing. It prompts a whole different thought process on our mind, whereas a lot of other things don't do that. I think that's part of where it comes from, and where you know we can't do what they do. We know we're not going to outlive the oak, right?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So how do you not respect that and have some like when imagine if you could your lifespan was like a tree of like a 500-year oak, like it's just unfathomable what it would be like to live that long,
I
or if we
can't
all did live that long.
I can't even imagine, like, as we talk about trees and, we start quantifying, some of those very historic and prevalent trees. Well, this one's, 350 years old. This one's 500 years old. And just, they haven't moved,
No.
right? So, in a sense, and we see that in biology where researchers can look at a 500-year-old tree with a core sample and see the weather patterns over the previous 500 years within that area, that tree, it's almost like they're the anchor
Yeah.
to that area of society, right? So um, yeah, there's just they're fascinating record keepers of just nature. They're not focused on materialism or anything else. They're really just there to record aspects of the evolution of nature and the evolution of Earth,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we play just a small portion of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in our young country, really, North America being, settled only, you know, I guess you could argue 500 years ago. I mean, I'm talking specifically with, Caucasians' arrival, but the trees there's still actually trees here that were here since then, like
Yes.
since Columbus, for example, or the
Yeah.
Quakers, the Puritans, I guess it was it what was it, the Plymouth Rock, was that Quick Pilgrims, that's the word I'm looking for, not Puritans.
Yeah.
But there's trees there that were there then that are still there, I think. Some of them, I mean, they were pretty great for building boats, so a lot, lot fell to the knife,
That's
right?
it.
But there's remnants still of that old stuff around, so it is fascinating. That just I think that's part of what it is, that we just can't, and it's part of the cool thing about working in them too. When you're working in a tree that there's pruning cuts. You have no idea. I was recently in Mexico. We went to Chichen Itza, and there's some big old trees that are cut and pruned. Although interesting to note, I didn't know about this, that they, in order to build the bricks they used to build everything, the Mayans, they needed heat. They used a sap from the trees and limestone, and they created like a like a substance like mortar to build the stones. But they cut all the forest, and that was one of the reasons they had so many years of drought. That ended up being their demise, was the clear cutting of so much of the rainforest
In order to build the structures that
in
they
order to
built.
build the Mayan cities. Yeah,
Huh.
they had to clear cut the trees because they needed the heat and they needed the sap, and they had the limestone natural, and that's how they built the blocks. Eh, so
Wow.
yeah, I'm sure I'm getting it a little bit off. So those of you that know more about me, you can't correct me right now, but it's something along the, yeah. And when you go there, it's all regrowing, right? And in fact, when they found it was completely overgrown because it had been abandoned.
Right.
Uh, and they've restored much of it, but it's just fascinating to think about what it was like before. No trees around the area for acres and acres, like long distances. But there you have a civilization that they didn't think about trees in that way. Interestingly enough, I don't know why we do, or maybe we're unique to arborists. I guess probably not everybody thinks about trees like we do. I should be careful, I suppose.
uh,
Not everybody. There's definitely people that just they don't look at trees in that way, right? They just
no, definitely not. I mean, there's so
yeah,
many different connections that trees have to us, and some of us
yeah,
see many, and some don't care to see even one, right? You
yeah,
see
yeah.
that in construction projects. It's like, okay, can we just, you know, cut that tree down so I can get a bigger footprint, right? So,
So would you say your tree career kind of begin? Was it like, where and how did you get into the tree world?
so I'm a big believer that things happen for a reason. There's a spirituality to things, and
Right.
you know, um, everything in life. I mean, you do set your own course to some extent, but there are reasons why you come across people early on, but you don't make that connection. You and I have known of each other for years, but
Yeah.
really, I'm going to say it's only been about the last 5 years where opportunities have arose where we've started to talk to each other in a I don't want to say a more intimate way, but
Yeah.
outside of the hey, how's it going? Yep, okay, and on we
Yeah. Yeah.
go. Both of us, being trainers in one aspect of it, and there are different aspects of trainers as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
depending upon whether you're in a private company in a college-based setting or a high school setting or what have you. They're all different aspects of training, and they all have positives and negatives to the expected setups that we could spend a whole podcast just talking about that, right? But I believe some things in life happen for a reason. You talk to a lot of individuals that end up in this profession. They didn't know the profession existed
Right.
before they stumbled upon it, and like I said, I shouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now because I did not know arboriculture existed. And what happened to me was I went through high school planning on being a chartered accountant. I've always been, in one aspect, interested in the business aspect and numbers.
Okay.
And I ended up taking a year off because something didn't feel right. So my parents were good enough. They said, "Well, you can take a year off, but you're going to work. You're not going to sit around home." So, I did a number of odd jobs over the course of that year, and then my mom came to me and she's like, "So, what are you doing next year? Because we said we'd give you a year off. So now you either go to college or you get out of the house. Your choice, right? Figure it out." And I could have easily just, all right, fine, I'll go find a place to live, but I did want to explore a career. And she said, "Well, why don't you look into golf course design? Because you're
Right.
always drawing these golf courses." I'd gone to my grandparents' farm. It's a 100-acre farm. I'd actually drawn a golf course based on the terrain and the
Wow.
trees and preserving the trees around the course design and stuff. Which um, so at that time in the early '90s, you didn't go to golf course architecture school,
Okay.
right? There was no such thing. You basically figured it out,
Yeah. Yeah.
worked on a golf course, apprenticed with an architect, and maybe eventually carved a name for yourself. So to get some of that experience, I looked at various colleges. I applied to Humber College. They had a landscaping program
Yeah.
that did have an arborist major to it, but that wasn't really clicking at the time. And I remember going for the interview because at that time it was the landscape technician program was highly sought after. There was like 30 spots and 100 individuals, so you had to go through an interview process. And anyway, I went in, had the interview with what would be my plant materials teacher, and went out of that interview. And mom said, "So how'd it go?" I go, "Well, I'm not going to Humber, because he basically told me the program is not for a golf course, individual, like getting into design or architecture. You need to find a different school that's more practical." And a month later, the acceptance to attend the course came in. So that kind of puzzled me, but in the end, it worked out in my life that was the best option at the time. I could commute from home, save money, carry a job, etc. So I went to Humber for a year, and about halfway through the first semester, I had that gentleman. His name was Paul Peach, who interviewed me as a plant materials teacher, and I had to go down and see him for some reason. And he's looking at me. He goes, you know, "I know you from somewhere, and I do not know where I know you from. Like, how do I know you?" And I
Huh.
said, "Well, I'm that golf course kid that you interviewed." He looked at me, goes, and I remember it strictly to this day. I tell my student, goes, "How the fuck did you get in here?" And I remember, and I said, "I've been asking myself the same thing since I got the acceptance letter." Right? So he had obviously, blackballed me or whatever. Nope, not that guy. And somehow someone's wires got crossed or what have you, and I ended up going to Humber. And then from there, I met Ian Bruce and became
Uh-huh.
fascinated with the arborist side, and then never looked back. Just found a joy and passion. But I never should have been in this profession, but I don't feel like I've worked a day in my life in it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's what I tell students is, you know, with any profession, try to find a profession that is more like a hobby. Because if it's more
Right.
like a hobby than it is a job, you'll be successful at it. The money that you want will flow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't need to be a multimillionaire to survive, in this world and have a bountiful and full life. If that's what you choose, then there are avenues to do that, obviously.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that fixation on money, for whatever reason, if you find that skill set that you're passionate about, the money seems to come,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
right?
So you went to Humber, but and you obviously well, not everyone may not know, but you work at Humber now. You're as a coordinator, I believe, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And did you like how long before you returned to your alma mater? Was there much time in between there? Have you?
So I graduated in and around 95, I think the certificate says.
Okay.
Went to work for Shady Lane Expert Tree Care at a new market there. I had a number of options, but that's the one that ended up um, pursuing. Um,
Okay.
to some extent, I guess I chose it, but it chose me too because Lewis was very supportive of giving back to the profession, and
Yeah.
for me to grow and evolve as I have over the almost 30 years. I needed that start. I didn't know it at the time, but once again, life somehow spiritually intervened, and that was the company that opened those doors. And I was at Shady Lane till 2003 when I started my own business, Graves Oak Tree Care Inc., or Go Tree for short. And
Okay.
throughout that time, I was chair of the Canadian Tree Fund. I was the second chair after Ken Lund, who was the initial chair. I was fortunate to be on the ISA Ontario board when it was in its first kind of big growth span, and was president of it for a bit. And then participated when I started my company with the Ontario Commercial Arborist Association, and ended up being president of it for a period of time. And it was kind of in that participation at the OCA that I was chatting with Word, and he was coordinator at the time. And I said, if you need any help, climbing is not my forte. I'm an old school climber. I have no problems admitting it. And at times, my fellow employees who have done climbing training and learned many new ways to do it, I can still outclimb some of them in the trees if I had to on the good old tot line hit, right? So, but I said to him, I'll teach, I'll teach anything other than climbing and plant healthcare because those were not, I was on
Uh-huh.
the production and biology side, not the spray and fertilize side. And he said,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. And he came back at me a month later and he's like, okay, so you're hired and you're going to be doing plant healthcare.
Yeah.
And I just kind of looked at it. It's like, okay, I'll roll with this. Like spiritually again, like why? Like I could have done tree ID, I could have done biology, could have done workplace safety, any number of them.
Yeah.
But had he offered me a climbing, there was no way I was doing the climbing. Like it's not that I didn't have an interest in it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I recognized at the time that it was in a huge state of evolution, and it was not my passion to be at the forefront of that evolution. I
Yeah.
understand it, and I'm supportive of it, but I knew there were individuals that could evolve that far better with their desire and growth and evolution than I ever could. So anyway, I phoned up Trish Thompson, who was my plant healthcare teacher back when I was in school in 94 and 95. And she helped guide me through here's some of the things to build on with the curriculum you got to follow. Here's my notes. And we're still great friends. I have a huge respect and admiration for Trish. And her being again what you would quantify as one of the first female arborists within the industry, more
Right.
so on the
Right.
plant healthcare side and entomology and all that than on the climbing side, right?
So, what time span is this now? We in? I don't know if I.
2007.
Okay, so 10 year ish.
Yeah, yeah. So about 10 years after graduating, I'm back at Humber and teaching plant healthcare, and then the new curriculum came in, and I was hired to take over as coordinator because we're what felt it was best to have younger blood in there, I guess, to do the next 10-year evolution, and I've been there ever since. And as I say to people, I know that you know the evolution of that coordinator's role and of what I do is closer to the end than it is at the beginning. So um,
Right.
yeah, so we'll see where it takes us and how much longer I'm down at Humber. But it's been a great opportunity to um, see all the changes and help to guide the collaboration into new challenges. I mean, one of the things that I've always tried to do is um, at times make decisions that I may not agree with. They may not have been my decision, but after having that collaborative effort, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to go this way or we're going to go that way. And sometimes we see that as a challenge for people. They, this is my opinion and this is the way we're going to go. We're going to, either slow the evolutionary process or stunt it or expand it, right? So I, I
Huh.
I try to have my own opinion, but look at the collaborative effort. And sometimes decisions I've made have been, in my opinion, better for the program, but maybe not would have been the ones that I would have made. And I
Right,
think
right.
that's what makes for a good one aspect of a
So
good
where do you
program.
think you got that type of wisdom from? Was it mentored to you? Were you born with it, or how did you arrive there?
I have no idea. I'm a big believer, there are certain innate things that are within our wiring. And why I was wired that way, I have no idea. Now, don't get me wrong, I can go off the handle just like anybody if I get passionate about something. And I can dig my heels into the ground and be stubborn. My wife and kids can attest to that. But I always try and I just I, I believe that growth is important, and in order not to stifle growth, you have to accept the fact that your opinion is one opinion, but not necessarily the right opinion at the time of that evolution. And how that's wired into me, I got no idea. There's not a mentor or an individual I can say that I've molded my way after that. But
Interesting. Um, you talked earlier about you piqued my curiosity on I think if memory serves me correctly, you mentioned like different kind of instruction or instructors or different. It wasn't styles. It was like I think you were kind of sort of talking about venues. Um, can you elaborate a bit on that? I think on what you meant, or do you recall what you meant by
So
that?
yeah, I do. So if we were, let's say, we'll just take the basic discussion on climate. Okay.
Okay.
So obviously, in order to have training, some aspect of curriculum around that subject has to be created, right? So
Right.
when you look at, and I pick climbing because my goodness, it has from when I started on a top line hitch to where it
Yeah.
is today and stationary rope systems, like it's been a bombshell of a 30 years. It's uh, like the atom bomb going off.
Yeah.
So many different avenues and beliefs in it. But if we take that aspect of climbing, if you were to go to the three colleges in Ontario, so Algonquin, Fleming, and Humber, they had program advisory committees.
Yeah.
So when you talk about climbing, each one of those program advisory committees that are collaborating, they're going to come up with some base similarities that are relevant towards all aspects of climbing. But then they're each going to have their idiosyncrasies that they want taught about climbing. So maybe one college is more revolutionary or open to the nuances of today, where another college, very similar curriculum, but they'll tend to stay and train more into the climbing systems in the 2010 range, we'll say, right? And then you've got private training, once again, like yourselves at Canada, where you're getting a similar group of individuals together and you're teaching your climbing in a slightly different way. So the base components are there, but they're taught differently, and the students are melded, we'll say, slightly differently through each growth aspect. But you take a student out of any one of those four concepts, we'll say
Uh-huh.
Algonquin, Fleming, Humber, or Art Canada. In the end, the individual coming out will take that knowledge and develop their tree climbing skills to what will suit them.
Yeah.
So
I
is it
think
in one aspect, is any one of those four curriculum aspects any different, or, prohibitive or advantageous to what happens in the end, which is after that base learning,
right.
the climber develops their own style.
Yeah. I think it makes me think, Tony, of the concept of principles and methods, right? Yeah, I don't know if you, Tony talks about this a lot, and we employ this in our curriculum development, and what do we integrate? What's new? Is it cool and new, or is it cool and actually functional, or is it new and cool or new and functional? And maybe you can explain, Tony, the principle methods concept quickly for
Yeah,
us.
it sort of started. It's a quote from basically the original systems analysis guy. But it basically, to paraphrase, if you can if you only understand methods, you're doomed to failure. But if you understand the principles of an act, then you can choose your own methods. So I equated a lot where it occurred to me is like with chainsaw. There are 110 different ways to use a felling notch and a back cut to cut down a tree. They're all just methods. When people start to argue about that stuff, they're typically arguing methods, right? But what you really need to teach somebody is the principles. And the principles of tree felling is a face cut in conjunction with a back cut forms a hinge, gives a certain amount of reliability. And any method that meets the principles, probably a valid method giving context, right? But if the method doesn't meet the principle, then it's invalid. So as an instructor, I can't possibly teach you. It would be folly for me to say, well, we're only going to learn the Humboldt notch because this is the notch you always use and it always works. It's just one method. It's useful in some instances, but not. As an instructor, it's far more useful for me to teach you the principle, and then you can apply your own method. And that's so now when we look at our training courses, we try and parse them down to what are the principles here that we need to teach. And then to emphasize those principles, we'll have some methods in there, right? You have to have an example of some ways. But if you could walk away with the principle, then we've done our job.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, Mark, they leave with principles, but what methods they may choose to use is based on the principles that I would agree with you are fairly common to all, the four you mentioned, and probably even greater than that if you go to wherever arboriculture climbing's taught. You're going to
Exactly.
probably find a general theme of principles that are the same. It's the methods that vary, right?
Yeah. And that method can vary just between instructor, right? Like
Absolutely.
if
Yeah.
if I look at because we just went through from 2008 to the 2022 was one full phase of climbing curriculum, right? And we had a number of different climbing instructors that went through during that point in time. And you're right, they all taught the principles, but their methods, were slightly different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a good way to put it. I never thought of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's important it helped me to delineate that, to differentiate a method from a principle, because if you do disagree or you do differ, what is it on? Is it a method or is it a principle? Because methods are, as long because the principles where the safety lies, right? You're following the principles, ultimately should be grounded in safety. The method, as long as it doesn't compromise the principle, shouldn't compromise the safety then, in essence, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting concept to ponder.
Well, when you look at our industry, some of the biggest arguments or disputes we have, they're almost always over methods, very
Yeah.
rarely over principles. And the people that tend to be the most zealous about their method don't understand the principle, right?
Yeah.
They only understand the method, which is,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that from a derogatory standpoint. When they take the time to get away from their method and understand the principle, then they either agree with you or they go away.
Yeah.
And both are a win in my book, right?
Yeah. But it's that exploration of the method that allows us to advance too, right? So it's good. I like that principle and method. That's
I as you were talking about your progression, Mark, in the industry, it reminded me of, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but this might be just a real interesting thing to get into here. I'm gonna dive into this, but one of the first times I met you, or the probably my most vivid memory of meeting you. Do you remember what
I'm
I'm gonna
wondering if
talk
it's
about?
different. I bet it's different than mine.
It might be. Well,
Yeah.
mine was, and I do not remember where this was, but it was right. It was the time that the you know the there was good intention for testing a hitch, and there was some tests that were done. I still believe today that they applied the wrong method to the test because it
I
was
agree
test
with you.
not made, and it was going to be talked about, and I had been quite outspoken about my feelings around it, and you asked me to curb my enthusiasm, let's say.
Oh yes.
Do you remember that?
Oh, I do now. Yep, I'd
That
forgotten it, but
Yeah,
yep.
like I've often pondered that, and as our I would now consider as our friendship has developed, that was our first one-on-one really, and you were charged with that task,
Yeah.
which couldn't have been easy. Like it wouldn't have been easy for me to do what you did, and yet you were brave enough and did it very professionally, very much so, and I appreciated that at the time. But yeah, do you remember what conference that was?
Ah, it had to
I
be
don't
in and
know,
around 2000 and 2000 because 'cause
three or
it'd be
four.
like so they did the testing. Now, was that
I think it was 02, 03,
the
04.
it was right in that time frame. Like I would have had to been on the board
You were
to
president.
have done
I
that.
think you were
So
president. I
I
think that you were president.
started I started my business in 2003, and it'd be right in that range, somewhere 2002, 2003, because I think 2004 would have been too late because
Okay.
the Arbor
Oh
Safe
three.
Work Practices and where all that not testing um, came out of was in relation to the Ministry of Labor challenging us to, get our practices in order, or they would do
Yeah.
it for us, basically. Now, I
Yeah.
wasn't on the board right around 98, 99, 2000 when that directive came in, and I remember sitting in on one of the consultation meetings, and there was like 25 people around this table from Ministry of Labor and whatever other government agencies, and Hydro One and ISA Ontario and OCAA, and I just forget why I was there, but just the understanding, trying to get the understanding of the aspect of fall protection, and that what we were calling fall arrest systems. At times we were incorrect in the usage of that verbiage, and we were maybe more work
Yeah.
positioning. So it was
Yeah.
all around there because basically the committee and ISA Ontario were charged with finding an approved set of knots to allow us to continue to climb.
Yeah.
And I had totally forgot about that event, and yeah, it was something that 10 years later, hard to say how I would have dealt with it, but at that time it was such a hot fire issue, and I knew personally, and this is once again your personal versus what you feel is best. I knew there was some merit with what your group of arborists were concerned and expressing with, right? And it's just like, there will be a time, but we got to get through
Yeah.
this hump, right? So yeah, it you know it scared the shit out of me a bit because I knew of you, and I had even though we hadn't really talked, I hadn't participated. I
No.
had a lot
No.
of respect for what you were doing because I knew it was from the heart of safety and the efficiency and protecting the worker, and that was always something near and dear to my heart because of the accident that I had had on the job site in the late '90s where I broke my C4, C5.
Right.
Once again, another spiritual intervention. How I'm not how I wasn't a quadriplegic, I have no idea, but that's a story for another time. But so I knew that whatever whatever thoughts and concerns you had with it, they were valid. But sometimes you've just got to get over one hump before you get to the next hump. And
Yeah.
to your point, I remember we did some testing because I had when I first started as coordinator there, 2008, 2009, I had some really great faculty there. Mark Cook was down at Humber,
Uh-huh.
and Ken Gillies, and to name a few. Wendell Lee was down there, and they're like, well, we need to test some knots, and because some of the knots that were valuable had not passed the test, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we went out, we got some funding, and we did spend a little bit of time at Fleming College, and at that point, it's like, you know what, like I got nothing to ground this to, because what the original knots were grounded to, in my opinion, it worked for it at the time, but did it answer the questions that the industry needed answered? It allowed us to keep working, but does that mean that we've got it right?
Right.
And I
Right.
didn't
Right.
believe we had it right. And I think a big aspect with the next round of knot testing, and believe me, there are a number of individuals that have talked about it over the years and tried to do it. And I said, the first thing you've got to do, if you really want to do this right, and do it for the growth of the industry, is you've got to relate it back to that original testing, which is what we had to go off. We had no choice. So it was reasonable to, but you've got to then disprove
Huh.
where the flaws in that testing was.
Yeah.
And just because the slippage factor worked for window washers, not windshield, but window washers,
Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't mean that that's the same principle as working in a tree. I mean, window washers work off of fixed anchor points.
Yeah.
We work off of organic anchor points. There's no way to tell that any one anchor point is structurally sound, because it's unengineered.
Yeah.
Where what a window washer is working off of is an engineered anchor point.
Well, it also was a stationary rope system, whereas at the time, stationary rope wasn't even being employed. Like, if had we been doing stationary rope, there would have been some potential comparison, but in moving rope, it was a whole different load factor as well. So we were testing hitches were tested against a stationary rope system versus the test was performed on a moving rope system, which is quite different, right?
Yes.
That was my main point about it, because the slippage wasn't calculated accurately, because it wasn't because both points moved, right? So it had,
Yeah.
and that was where, not to mention the shock absorbing factor, right? Like, shock absorption is typically good in a fall.
Yes, exactly. But
It
even
was
that, you
yeah,
look
but
at,
I also know there was concern, because there'd been a fall and there was things happening, right? So it was, but anyways, that was the first time, and but I'm curious what your memory is now.
so I may be wrong, because it's been about 30 years, but um, I believe, I know you were floating around, I'm sure of it, but it was Tree Care Industry Association, and it was either like 95 or 96. I can't remember if it
Yeah,
was in
yeah,
Columbus or
yeah,
Indiana.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Arbor
Columbus.
Master was
Yeah,
doing demonstrations on that tree that they had set up.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I remember you, because I just think myself, there's a Canadian on the American stage,
yeah,
uh, presenting to this wide range of all aspects, but majority being aspects of field arboriculture.
yeah,
And you could just see the passion you had in teaching, just watching you present it. I I want to say you were up the tree, but I know maybe you were up the tree and working around, but you were there, were you not?
Yeah.
That
That in
stage.
fact, I think that was yeah. It might it wasn't my first one. It was near the first or second one. Let me just think. That might have been the first one I was ever at. And yeah, I was starting to work with Ken and Rip, and they had me. Yeah, I was. Yeah, Columbus for sure.
Yeah. So that was
And I didn't
probably
miss many for many years. So that's interesting. But I wouldn't have been able to see you in the crowd. Right?
no, exactly. But that's my first recollection of you, and
Interesting.
you floated around. We'll say you and I floated around the various Ontario
Yeah.
tree climbing
Oh
competitions.
yeah.
So I remember seeing you and Andrew. You were very close, and you still are to this day, obviously. But I remember you guys floating around doing your thing, and
Yep. Yep.
those are my recollections of you. But I'd totally forgotten about that knot one. But yeah, that scared the dickens out of me, and but yeah, I
It
remember
was all
that.
good. It I didn't even think about that when we started when we were agreeing to do this podcast, but
And
I'm
so
glad
much was
we had a chance to
wrong.
talk about it.
So much
Yeah.
was wrong with that knot testing. Like even you just look at the compatibility aspect of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how the top line hitch passed, but you could make argument that is an incompatible knot
Yeah.
on the rope that it was tested on. Sure, it didn't give you the slippage, or sorry, it gave you the slippage parameter that you wanted, but it's not. And I don't get me wrong, I climb on a top line hitch on the braided system, but when we talk so much about compatibility, it's compatible with a 3-strand rope system. It's not
Yeah.
really compatible with the way it should work in using braided rope.
It is fascinating. That's one in particular that I think a lot of people don't realize. And I didn't, I wish I could remember. I think it was Ken. I can't remember who it was that told me the first time I understood that if you tie it in 3-strand, that it doesn't roll and it doesn't tighten. Like the tail doesn't move into the
Move it
hitch.
all.
But as soon as you put it on braided, it'll untie itself, right? So the stopper knot became a thing. And it just, when they switched to synthetic ropes becoming mandatory because safety reasons, so they just switched ropes, but they didn't switch the hitch, and that went on for quite a few years. I mean, Tony,
Yeah.
you probably climbed on a taut line, didn't you? On Arborplex, or did you actually have 3-strand too?
No, I never climbed on 3-strand, but the first knot I learned was a taunt line. Climbed on it for a number of years. It was the
And
only
it would
knot.
your figure eight would jam up, and it would always get tight.
I didn't use the figure eight, but they always had me tie the stopper knot.
Oh, okay, just a
on
knot in the
tail.
end. Yeah.
Knot, and that was pretty. And I still teach it to this day because I say it's the life you save will probably be your own. Tie the stopper knot.
Right. But you make a good point. I like the way you put that about compatibility, Mark. And I think the industry did a lot of that in the early years, and I'm hoping we've grown out of that. Where, you know, it's the same as cutting the bridge for rescue.
Yeah.
The story behind that was someone fell because the termination knot to the harness came undone when they cut the bridge, and that's where the figure eight in the bridge came from, was to act as a stopper. So when you cut it, it wouldn't untie itself. And I learned that after that. I learned that the figure eight stopper knot in the bridge was to indicate which line to cut. Because if you were hanging and all three were close together, you
Yeah.
knew cut the one with the 8. But I was never told cut on the side away from the hitch so it could stop it from sliding through. That part had been lost. And then I'm thinking, but maybe we shouldn't cut the rope at all. How about we don't do that, right? Because you've changed by tying off the fall and cutting the bridge, it suddenly changes the dynamics of the system. And that's why the knot came undone in the first place.
Yeah.
But, these hindsight analyses, right? And a very similar type of thing occurred with that knot testing, and everyone's intention was good. And I still can believe that. And even at the time, I think I was young and impetuous, and I didn't have the foresight to see,
We
the
both were.
intention. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You live and learn, right? You live and learn.
Yeah.
But it's all, like I say, part of the progression. Very interesting. Like Tony, that whole figure eight, not in the bridge thing, was that something that you remember being taught that it served two functions, stop or end, or was it where to cut?
I always thought that was the other side of the coin. Like it was there to act as a stopper knot, so you had to cut on the opposite side of it, right, away from
Yeah,
the termination hitch. So that's the way I learned it. It was always both, right? Um,
and where to cut.
right. But it's
Okay.
this. I think one of the things that comes in with when it comes to arborists and numbers is so often we're good arborists, but we're not good scientists. Um, so we end up dealing with incomplete data sets and we don't know it. So it reminds me of, as I love Radiolab, and so they had this guest on who was talking about the terminal velocity of cats. So apparently in New York City, a lot of cats fall out of windows, right? I
Right.
guess it's a thing, right? But they found there's this interesting statistic. So if a cat falls from like, and I don't remember the numbers, I'm just going to paraphrase, but say from like the fifth floor down, it's injured, right? And then from like the seventh floor or the ninth floor to the fifth floor, it dies. But then once it falls above the ninth floor, it's the survival rates start to go up. So the guy theorized that the cat reaches terminal velocity and it somehow changes it. And then a couple episodes later, they have Neil deGrasse Tyson on. He's like, no, it doesn't work because it's an incomplete data set. Nobody takes a dead cat to the vet. So they had a whole set of numbers that wasn't being accounted for, right? They were only basing their numbers on the cats that lived because you don't take a dead cat to the vet. And I think that's a lot of what happens in the arboricultural industry. It's like we're really good arborists, really good with trees. We're not really good scientists, right? Like all the variables that you could get into are just insane. So it's always kind of funny about that, right? Like you have to take a total look at the data set, and then
Yeah.
the problem is then how do you account for all the variables? Because who's to say the tree doesn't flex, or the knot wasn't
Right.
as tight, right? Like,
Oh,
or the rope was as new, didn't have the same nap. And I had the privilege of working with literally some rocket scientists. We were doing some rigging data research, proposed rigging data research. It never came to fruition, but we got hooked up with these scientists, these material specialists from NASA, right? Like, and when you start talking to these guys, it's like, oh my God, like design a test. Like, and you look at the stupid little things, even the really good tests that we've done. And I'm not disvalidating. I'm not saying that that's not useful. Those things are useful, but you have to take it with a grain of salt because you're dealing with an incomplete data set.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't take dead cats to the vet. So that's why I tell people, like, be careful with your numbers. You don't take dead cats to the vet.
Interesting. Wow. So, your, I mean, your tenure with Humber as coordinator has been. Are you the longest standing coordinator now?
I don't know if I've got Ian Bruce beat yet, but if I haven't, I got to be closing in on him.
Yeah, yeah, because it's been well over 10 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, 2008. So what are we at? 17 years, I guess.
Yeah,
Never,
wow.
never planned that it would be that long. That's for sure.
And I mean, in amongst that's not a year-round program, so you still have always maintained private tree care practice.
Yes. Yeah. 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 No,
Yeah,
I've my company is still up and going, and that presents its own set of challenges when you're teaching and you're working with the students and you've got a crew or two out there. You really have to lean on your management team, and I've always been fortunate to have a great administrator in my office and great crew leaders that understood that part of my reason being down at Humber was to give back to the profession, and in allowing by taking on their roles and responsibilities in our company, it allowed me to give back to their on behalf of them as well,
right.
right? So, but and speaking about giving back, I do have to say this is I love the sprout shots. Your sprout
Oh,
videos,
wow.
you
Okay.
got to do some more of those. Just those quick little snapshots. When I was prepping for this, I watched a few of the podcasts, and that was one that I thought it was just neat. It was just like on the fly, and
Yeah.
you know, there's so much opportunity for you to expand
The sprouts.
the documentation of history that you're doing with these. Like we talked about earlier, a tree basically is the record keeper of the area that it grows in. I think it's great that you guys took on this challenge of the podcast and are documenting history, like your interviews with Jack Phillips, I believe it is, right,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Don Blair. Some
yeah,
of the newer ones like Wenda Lee and Andrew
yeah.
Hordyke, and yeah, it would have been great to have Shigo have participated in a couple of these with you.
Oh yeah, I would have loved
I
it.
think you could still get Kim Coder though.
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
think
need
he's
to
still
talk to
on this
Kim.
side of the earth, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need to talk to Kim. There, we still got a list of guests we need to get on, and Ian's definitely on our list
Yeah.
to get on. You know, when you like, maybe you can help me with this, and in the for the sake of posterity and history, for those that at least are in Canada. But you know, 80 prior to 87, I believe it was 87 when ISA Ontario was formed, but prior to that, it was ISA Canadian chapter. Are you aware of
Something
that?
like
Those,
that, yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And
because I know our chapter formed, Prairie chapter formed in 87, and that was the first departure from when the Canadian chapter basically was disbanded, and ISA Ontario, be, the ISA Canadian chapter became ISA Ontario, and then the Prairie chapter formed. And I'm not sure if BC was always part of PNW or if that's when BC joined PNW. I
I'm
don't know
not
about that one.
I'm not sure. Slightly
That's I
before
need
my
to.
time.
Yeah, I need to find
But
someone that
but
maybe built.
what is interesting is um, during my tenure as president, we were in that shift away from Randy Lidke had retired, and we were looking
Right,
at where we were evolving to, and that meant that we didn't have a home as far as
right.
for the documents and stuff. So I remember myself and Shane Plowman, and you know. Having to move the documents from Shane's office into my garage, and then going through some of the history that was in there, and coming across the Ontario chapter had developed something similar to ISA certified arborist. And I know I just one
Wow.
of the videos I watched preparing for this, Tony, you had mentioned Pendel. You guys had done a certified
Mhm.
arborist type um, certification program prior
Mhm.
to ISA. And yeah, there were the little badges that
Really?
Ontario chapter were gonna give. Yeah,
Wow.
so that
And that what year was that? Do you think?
I think that was like early 90s. Like ISA certified arborist, I think it just came out in around 94, did it not? Was it 94?
90. I thought maybe it wasn't in 93. So yeah, I think you're right.
Right.
Right
So
around there, or
because
was
I
it?
want to
Or was it a little earlier? 92 maybe.
yeah, I want to
Anyway,
say like the box was like late 80s, early 90s, but like I want to say it was like 91 or 92. And this is going
yeah.
back, this box I'm talking about is going back almost 20 years. Well, yeah, 20 plus years ago now when I last saw it, right? So who knows where or if it even exists today, but in and around 2003, 2004, when I had those documents, there was some phenomenal stuff in there, right? So, but that stuck out to me as yeah, if and I, don't get me started. There's pros and cons to the ISA certified arborist
Right.
designation and the various
Yeah.
training things, but once again, it's created so much growth for our profession's recognition,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that you could have established it any other way. And you know, evolution is key, and I think it's great that one key evolution is that renaming, or I don't know the exact process, but how they are creating, as of December, the last December, I think they released the Urban Forester, what's it called, proficiency. So to replace the
Oh, okay.
municipal specialist, right? And I think that's um, an important event for our industry, because there is a big difference between forestry and urban forestry.
Yeah.
And sometimes the aspects of urban forestry, I mean, you look back into some documentation into the early 1900s, late 1800s, I forget just where the first aspect of arboriculture and urban forestry was used as a term together.
Right.
It was never arboriculture and forestry, arboriculture and urban forestry.
Yep.
And when you start to look at, the evolution of that term, urban forestry, I mean, you know, in some aspects they refer to it as a collection of trees. Well, I think they're the big telling factor, and this is once again my opinion, between forestry and urban forestry is, um, urban forestry has to deal with human interface.
Yeah.
So you can
It's
have
the
a
human
group of,
forest.
uh, there you go, right? So you can have a group of trees, but you're making recommendations. You're looking at those trees individually as to how they are affected by the interface of human interaction,
Yeah.
right? So, I kind of say, if you look at a ravine, right, there are forestry concepts in the ravine, which when we went through our, as industries about 5 years ago, right around the start of the pandemic, the registered professional foresters designation,
Yeah.
they were reviewing the legislation behind that and terminology, and we came up through those discussions with the term urban woodlot, which basically
Right.
signifies what one of the main principles of forestry is, which is woodlot management. But the way that you manage a woodlot is completely different than the way you manage a grouping of trees that have
In a
human
forest.
interface.
Right. Or a forest.
Yeah,
Right. Like it's a small forest within, an area. It's
that's it.
different than a natural forest, and that's not inhabited. Or whereas if it's a 5 acres surrounded by urban, it's not exactly a forest.
Exactly. Right.
It
So,
is, but it is, and I remember Shigo would talk a lot about this. He said the first he recalled sitting in a meeting somewhere and someone threw it out as kind of a joke. Well, I guess we're talking about the urban forest then. And he said it just sort of stuck. And he said it was never really intended to be a thing. And he said it's a bit of an oxymoron, right? Like the two words are really diametric. And
yes,
yeah, we put them, because they don't, they're literally the opposite of each other.
they
In
are
all
when you think
definitions. And
about
then
it,
we
right?
say we make a new term called urban. We say, how can you have such a thing? But it's definitely coined in here to stay. I wonder often about what he would have to say about it now, because he didn't really like it. He didn't think it was the best term. He just liked arboriculture. It was the care of trees, right? But what I find fascinating now is municipal tree care is kind of taking on the term urban forest,
And
and
I
they're
think it
urban
should.
foresters. And whereas private tree care guys aren't going to call themselves urban foresters, they're going to be arborists.
Yeah, but I think, and you know, I could go on a completely different bent with this, but over the last couple of years, I've been kind of saying in conversations with individuals, it's like, you know what, there is a practicality to the term urban forestry, and
Absolutely.
and an arborist plays a role in it, an urban forester plays a role in it,
Yep.
and a forester plays a role in it. And
Yep.
I think the next 30 years, I say the evolution of urban forestry over the next 30 years, because we're just starting to see connections with, well, we have to have tree preservation bylaws for canopy protection or
Yep.
canopy preservation, and they're starting to put percentages. We want to achieve a 25, 30, 35% canopy preservation, and the discussion on how we use trees as a component of managing wastewater within the urban setting.
Right. Yeah.
And I kind of say to people, if you're just getting into, like, for myself, I think, getting into arboriculture over the last 30 years of my profession, the big thing was to see the evolution of climate and the development of safety and safety practices on the job site to
Mm,
decrease the possibility of our probability of critical injuries and fatalities, which we
mm,
talk about when I teach my workplace safety classes. But I truly believe the way in which urban forestry needs to develop so that it can be quantified by politicians. It can
mm,
be understood that yes, have to we have to provide so much money on the federal
mhm,
budget sheet, which then is used to provide so much money on the provincial budgeting balance sheets to get to the
mhm,
municipalities. I think you're going to see the evolution of urban forestry over the next 30 years, very similar to the 30 years we saw climbing. I kind of like an urban forestry right now that
yeah, I can
in
see it.
that taut line hitch moving from manila to braided rope.
Yeah.
And
You know, the environmental utility aspect,
yeah,
in order to, like, a utility needs care and maintenance, and, us giving it that credential or terminology, or putting that seed of thought into the heads that this is a utility, like any utility in in a city. Roads, it's infrastructure, right?
yes, yeah.
That's important to, but, and I get, yeah, I
It's
hear what you're saying. That's a
unengineered
really good take.
infrastructure. It's organic infrastructure,
Right, which is
right?
fascinating, right? Like, it's, like, people would definitely be unhappy if the plumbing doesn't work and the heat doesn't work and the water doesn't work, but we don't think of it. What would it be like if the trees didn't work? If, and until something was to take all of our trees at once, people wouldn't really be able to understand the impact. And I believe it would be quite profound. You
Well,
know,
it it would be because history repeats itself. And at the beginning of this discussion, you talked about your trip down to the Mayan culture
yeah, right.
and the obliteration of trees to develop
Yeah,
some aspect of engineered structure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
And it ultimately caused their demise. I was fascinated because they had 300-year of drought. And that's why they were increasing their human sacrifices and all this, because that was the purpose of it, right? They believed that, and they did their child sacrifices of all horrifying things, because a pure person, which only an uncorrupted child, 10 to 12 years old, could go talk to the gods. That's what they believed. And so, but for 300 years they're doing this, and people were just like, what, this shit ain't working, man. Like, and they just left. The whole thing fell apart because there's no rain for that long. They had natural aquifers and stuff, the cenotes. So that's not like they were desperate, but things were really bad. And people would never, when the Spaniards came, they were like, why aren't you going to the city? It's beautiful. It's all, because they're like, I know, no, we're not. They,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. So they just left it like this. And the Spaniards took all the stones and built churches and communities in the 1600s from all these ruins, because
Yeah.
the stones are great, and they're you can see them in buildings today, and it's just. But you're right. Like, they didn't understand the impact of what they were taking there. That particular utility needed to be preserved as well.
Yeah, yeah. But no, I think any young individual, young or second career, you know, finder of the arboriculture profession and urban forestry, it's going to be a fascinating 30 years for them.
Yeah,
I'm going to enjoy watching it. I lived the 30-year climbing expansion kind of from the outside looking in, and you know. Helping to just understand the various discussions. But yeah, the next 30 years, I think that's going to be the big growth in our industry is, understanding arboriculture's role in urban forestry and the new definement. Because we're just not going to survive if we don't figure out how to develop subdivisions around green space
yeah,
and the importance of mitigating high rises. Like cities don't need to have the population density that they have, right?
right. Yeah,
And I think the pendulum over the next 30 years has to find that balance in the net, either the evolution of existing cities or the development of new cities. because housing's not going to go away,
Yeah, or
and
a new way. Yeah,
mental stress is not going to go away. And I'd be curious to see the research around a population and severe mental stress in a city setting versus the same population of individuals in more of a naturalized setting.
yeah,
And I believe that mental stress will be far less in that naturalized setting.
yeah. I agree. Well, I think there has been some studies to that effect, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe there
Uh,
has, but I didn't want to
yeah,
talk to them.
yeah. I don't know the specific details
Not me.
about it, but I remember even in the journal, like not like quite a few years ago already, there was some research to that effect. I remember Jim Scarra talking about that. But when he was director, which is a while ago now already. But yeah, I don't know. Tony, you aware of those?
Not
Uh,
aware enough to speak to him. I mean, there's I believe it's true, but my evidence is anecdotal, so I don't.
right, we'd be throwing cats out of windows or something like that.
Yeah. Well, the cats fall out of the windows. Nobody throws them. It's not. They're not
All right,
mean
right,
to
right,
cats. They just fall out.
yeah. And no, and they said above 9 stories they all live because nobody took them to the hospital because they were
Well,
all
the
dead.
only ones that got taken to the vets were the alive ones, right? No one took the dead ones, so you don't know how many died.
Yeah, I just hope through
Interesting.
this next 30-year process, as we as a profession and a growth industry evolve it, we're able to get better um, acceptance from other professions, like respect,
Right.
right?
Well,
Some of the ways that ISA certified arborist certificate is manipulated by other professions. It's unfortunate
yeah,
because they'd be the first professions to say nope, stay out of ours. But there's a buck to be had, and the arborists
yeah,
haven't tightened that up enough. And don't
right.
get me wrong, I think the ISA certified arborist, the theoretical knowledge in it is important for other professions. Like when we went through that registered professional foresters review, there's 14 different professions like landscape architect and um, uh, design, and I just can't think of them all, like ecologist,
Hmm.
and they all play
Foresters.
their own role in the in the aspect of urban forestry, right? But some of them
It's
don't.
almost like the term. I like the thought, like they're obviously willing to adjust terminology and, maybe the name is too suggestive of a like maybe a certified arborist isn't the right term for that program anymore. Like
Exactly.
it should, you know what I mean? Like, cause I think it gives people the wrong impression.
Yeah.
And I've on a lot of people that, landscape architects and so on, or maybe they're consultants at an environmental firm and they're like, well, I could be an arborist. I just got to get this book and read. And, they have enough years that they quasi qualify and they got a degree. And
Yeah.
so go for it. And they're like, oh, I'm a certified arborist now. Look at that. I think that's where some of the cons are in the program, right?
Yeah.
That, because, and in some ways, I believe our industry, believe, no, maybe might be a bit, I've experienced that, we've done it to ourselves in some ways, particularly the municipalities by, got to have a certified arborist on staff, right? And it ignores all other credentials that exist. Like I know there was one incident where a municipality said, okay, everybody on your crew needs to be certified arborist. It's not that hard. We're just going to make it a blanket statement. And the company that had been traditionally doing their urban, their getting their bids had 4 degreed people on staff, had uh, people with diploma from colleges and Humber like apprentice grads that had moved out here. And they only had 3 certified arborists because these people had been to school and they were like,
Yeah.
they just hadn't done it. And maybe they should have, but the point was they didn't. So he didn't have enough people. Like they said everyone's got to be certified. So he didn't get the contract. And the company they got the contract, all they had was certified arborists. They didn't have any other credentialing whatsoever. So the owner made a point. He wrote an article about our newsletter saying like, so what we're saying is, as long as you got a certified arborist, that's a written test, and long as all your staff has that, that's better than my 4 staff with degrees, my 3 staff with apprenticeship program, and
Yeah.
my other 2 staff that have, like, there's something wrong here,
Yeah.
because that's not you're not comparing apples to apples, right? And I think as simple, you could just say, oh, well, just get your silly certified arborist then. But there's a loophole there that's pretty dangerous. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to.
Yeah. But part of that comes from the respect of those other professions, right? Like,
Yeah.
part of it we
I guess,
do it to
yeah.
ourselves, but part of it is, you know, that aspect of professional respect that sometimes they build their certificates and stuff on, right? Like, respect us because you got to be
Yeah.
do this, this, and this, but then, well, you know, it's convenient over here, right? We'll just write that exam. So I do think it's, don't get me wrong, it's a positive thing, but yeah, it does need some tweaking.
Yeah.
Right?
And it makes sense. It's been 30 years almost or whatever, right? Like it's evolution. Things change.
I'll take the change of the municipal specialist to the urban forest professional, I think is what they call it. I'll take that change first because I think that is a really positive direction. So.
Yeah. It's more, well, everyone that is a municipal specialist, their title would be urban forester, right? It makes sense. You know, the other interesting thing I think that we're going to see in the future along these lines is the practicalness of the trade. Like, it's a hands-on job here. I think we're a long way, if ever, of robots or AI doing tree work.
No, I agree with
you. Like it's same with electric and plumbing, you know, these types of trades that we're going to see that whole group of people that do this. It's just going to change a little bit. Like, it's going to become more of a demanding thing, you know, like it's more specialized, like it just can't be done artificially.
Yes. Yeah.
I think the spillover is that, you know, AI in its various forms will eliminate some types of jobs, or at least the higher paying versions of those jobs. And
right.
it opens, you still have people that needs jobs. So, you know, maybe they'll roll into more of the trades.
Yep. Wow. That was a great conversation. Thanks, Mark, for agreeing to be on the show and giving us some good ideas for some new guests. We certainly going to look to get Ian Bruce on the show. And Tony, any questions or anything else for Mark?
Nope, no deep questions today.
No
It's my deep question day off.
Well, I just want to give a shout out, say thank you to both of you for you know, doing this. History is important because you learn off of history, and humans don't often, you know, get the opportunity or take the opportunity to document it. Just a few podcasts, and I'm gonna work my way through all of them, much to my chagrin, because you know, she hears enough about trees, let alone having me talk about the tree podcast I was listening to. But thanks for doing what you're doing. I think it's a great avenue to capture philosophies and create discussion and save it for posterity purposes. Keep doing what you're doing.